All right, good evening, everyone. This is the speaker series brought to you by the Catholic Student Association. Tonight we're discussing Catholic marriage together with our 4 panelists who are experts, I'm told. So they're gonna introduce themselves, talk about sort of their stories, and then there will be Q&A at the end for all of you. Hopefully, maybe you want to get married or like find someone. Anything, like, any questions you have for them about discerning marriage or dating in college, like whatever you may have. So please welcome our guests. Thank you.
I guess I get to start. It's very live. We're going to do a quick round of intros just so you know who we are. And I'll start. My name is Beth Phillips. I am married to this guy who's going to introduce himself in just a second. We have been married for 28 years this year. As far as my background goes, I am a cradle Catholic. I grew up all over the U.S. Right before I came to Rice, because I'm a grad of Rice as well. Sid Rich, if you ask, because I know you will. There's one. Right before I came to Rice, I did live in Houston last, but I also lived in Wisconsin and Virginia and Pennsylvania and Georgia and I don't know, I'm forgetting places. Maryland, a long time. I studied math here, and I thought I would be a teacher, and to a certain extent I was. I went and did a lot in education for a long time, including teaching grades from 6 through 12 in math at various times. My current job is to work with an education community online. So I help to lead that community for a tech company that helps all of our K-12 sysadmins to make things work in their districts and schools. So part consulting, part community management, that kind of thing. And then, what else might help? My family was also Catholic. So I grew up in a home, like I said, I was cradle Catholic, but both my parents were as well. So I'll leave it at that. I'll let you introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Scott Phillips, and I got a graduate degree here. I was at the Shepherd School. I played bassoon, and I've played bassoon in church since 4th grade. No, actually maybe 6th grade, I don't know, it's a while back. And I'm from Chicago area. I went to undergraduate at DePaul University in Chicago. Came down here for grad school. I wanted to be an orchestral musician. I did not become an orchestral musician, but life happens. And right now I work at a software company that makes electronic medical record software for doctors. So, doesn't really fit anything, but it works. And my parents are Catholic. I was raised Catholic, so no particular surprise there, I guess.
My name is Valerie Dolmert. I also was a cradle Catholic, but my mom was Catholic and my dad was Protestant, and it worked out just fine. So, but my dad was incredibly respectful of the guidelines the Catholic Church asked, and he actually took several classes on Catholicism so he could understand and respect it, and drove us to church no matter where we were. So that worked out very well. I'm a military brat, so I was born in Washington State, moved to Germany, spent most of our time in San Antonio, and I went to Texas A&M and got an education degree and met him there.
I'm Andy Dolmert. We have been married for this year 32 years. I got it wrong earlier. I, again, another cradle Catholic, but like Valerie, my father was, or is, Methodist, and my mom's Catholic, and has been supportive of us all the way through. We have 4 kids that are 26, 26, 23, let's see if I get this right, 20, and 17. So we have them ranging all the way through. And I went to A&M, we met at A&M. I, like Scott, I got a degree in recreation, parks, and tourism. And I'm now a project manager at HP. So, and have worked for ExxonMobil. So, you know, life happens, and you end up in different areas, so.
I realized we forgot to tell them about our family. We went through their children. I was like, I do have children. We do. We have 3 kids. So they are 21, 16, and 12. And I don't know, one's graduating college this year, coming up soon. So that's, not too far maybe from where some of you are. And I don't know if there's anything else I missed on that side. We can talk more about our stories, which I think is the first thing we kind of wanted to cover, was like how we met, what it was like to decide to get married. And I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay.
Both of them, so you can interrupt each other.
That might be fun. No, I'm gonna actually,
Okay, let's see.
okay, we'll see how this goes. You start.
Okay, sure. So we met at the Catholic Student Center in the choir. She was singing, I was playing bassoon, and it was. I can't go too much into my psyche, but I fell for her quite hard at first, but
He says that, but he didn't remember my name.
there was another girl named Elizabeth, which I slightly confused her with, but it wasn't really a person, it was just a name. Really, it was just a name. So, she and I fell in some of the same friend circles, so we did a lot of stuff together. I think that's how we sort of knew of each other. We had a lot of the same interests, so there was a lot of things to talk about. We became friends over time, and it was towards the end of our time at Rice that we got.
This is what happens when you've been married this long. Yeah, so it was my junior year.
We started dating.
And near the end of my junior year that we started dating.
Right. I was a grad student, so I was here 3 years, so yeah. Middle of my second year here. Yeah, okay, that's so fine. So we had gotten to know each other, we'd been in the same groups of friends, and then we started dating exclusively, and then not too long after we graduated, it's the summer after we graduated, we got engaged, and then she went off to go do a year of service up in New York, so I didn't really see her much that year, but then she came back and we got married, and that was all good.
It was all good.
It's all the goodness.
So I think being in the same group of friends was very important to me, because I felt like I could know more about her based on how she reacts with her friends, and to be a part of the whole group and see the whole relationships and see how she builds relationships, and I felt like I wanted to be part of her relationships.
And remember her name.
And I did eventually remember her.
That helps.
I just like to, rhythm about that a little bit. So from my perspective, yes, we met, but again, we were just kind of hanging out in the same Catholic circles and enjoying each other's company and doing a lot of things, but I was also dating someone else. And
Yeah, there was that.
and it was pretty serious. Like I sort of expected we would probably get married one day. And I had known this person for a good long while. There had been other people during my time at Rice as well, where I just had casual dates or, hung out together. So it wasn't like I was at that moment looking for someone, or that when I met him, I was like, oh, this is, romantic comedy. they fell for each other right there, right? But there wasn't not noticing each other. One of the things happens all the time. Little abnormal heart rates go off whenever you start talking to crowds. Anyone? Thank you. So one of the things that I remember about our time in that dating space was that it was easy in a way. Like, it was just easy to hang out together. It was easy to talk. It was easy to bring up hard conversations or things that, like every time we went to the next kind of conversation, it was like, oh, we kind of agree, or we have an easy time dealing with what we don't agree on. So I enjoyed that, like, awareness. Now, too much story to go into about how and why other relationships fell apart and this one developed, but he waited, basically, was a lot of what was going on. So, as I was figuring things out and deciding whether or not this person I had been dating was really for me, for the long haul, he was kind of just waiting and being a good friend, which was really helpful. What do I want to add to that? I think I want to let these guys talk about their story too. So I will just add on to that sometimes the questions that we've been asked before about all of this is like, but there's always, well, how did you know he was the one? Or how did you know she was the one? But there's also, how did you know you ever wanted to get married? Whether it was that person or at all. And that's a little harder for me to answer, so I might come back to that, but I will say that I kind of never thought I wanted to do anything else besides be married. So when I think back just as an individual and go back to when I was young, right? To me, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get married, I wanted to have a family. I'm sure at least some of that was because I came from a home where that was a good experience, right? I'm aware that that may be a harder question for some people than it would have been for me, right? If you have a blended family, if you have a home where a parent is maybe not all that you need, then it is a different experience of wondering whether or not you want to have a marriage, have a family, what does it mean to have a vocation that relates to all of that. So a little straightforward there from my perspective. And we'll take questions later about some of this. But he did mention one other thing, which was that I went off after we got engaged. And I went to New York, and I did youth ministry because I didn't know if he was going to ask me to marry him. And we were in our final year, right before graduation, and we'd been dating for about a year and a half at that point, seriously. And he finally asked me to marry him. And it was during the summer when I was finishing up my teaching portfolio, and I had to give a presentation about it that week, and he decided that was the right weekend to ask. And I already had plans to go to New York, to live there for a year, to do youth ministry with the Capuchin Franciscans, and and so now it's good. Does this change everything, or do I still go? And so we had to discern that together too. So I still went, and we spent a year and a half engaged, a year of which was apart. So that's a whole nother experience and story we can talk about, but it was a good one. All right, I think we should let Andy and Valerie talk.
All right, so I am 3.5 years older than Andy. And I was a senior and he was a freshman, and I had just come off of a horrible engagement, horrible. And
Engagement? Did y'all catch that? Engagement?
So, awful. And he said something very nice to me, which involves a curse word, so I won't say it, but it was. He basically said, all men, and he said, we're not all, ever. So, and he didn't realize how important that was for me to hear at the time, because he was just this silly freshman. Anyway, we met in choir at Century Singers at A&M, and it was nice that we both had St. Mary's, the Catholic Church, to grow closer in. And, what you said about Scott waiting, Andy was really good about that, because I was gun shy, but I ended up working the summer before I student taught in Indianapolis, which was 3 hours away from where his parents were in Chicago. So we ended up seeing a lot of each other that summer, and he was just very patient, and I realized I love spending time with him. I love that we can share our faith. I will say he's something that I think I love so much is that, and he's still this way today, what is in my best interests is incredibly important to him. And that's just something that comes very, very naturally to him. And that is extremely helpful. Do you want to add anything?
Should we back it up a little bit?
To what?
And you wouldn't let me inquire?
It's really not.
Can you guys hear that? Okay.
Valerie, as a senior, was vice president of the choir, and I was in choir in high school, and I was in the corps, and I was getting out of that and kind of recovering from being in the corps and not having great grades. And when she was the person interviewing new members, and the choir director said, "We need a bass, we need this," and I was okay bass at the time. And she said, "Mr. Dolmert, are these grades going to be a problem?" "No, ma'am. No, ma'am. The grades were a problem." So, like Beth and Scott said, at some point along the way, A&M decided it was better for me to spend some time at home with my parents in Chicago. And so I spent a semester trying to get my grades back up after we had started dating and that kind of stuff. So we spent a semester apart. And then, like Valerie said, she was a senior. She went to work in Conroe. I was still at A&M. And we talked about some of the different things, the group of friends that we had. Valerie was working as a teacher in Conroe in the Woodlands, and I was at A&M. And we would go out and we would go dancing and that kind of stuff. And Valerie knew all of my friends, and I knew, and so there was no jealousy, there was no worry there. That was part of our relationship as we grew, to have that group of friends that was, taking care of each other, and I knew a lot of her teacher friends that had come out through about the same age as us, that kind of stuff. So I think, being easy, being helpful, being all those things, but also having that trust of the relationship was very important, because as we all spent time apart before we got married, that was very important that we had that trust. And Valerie mentioned something about her best interest, but I'm always talk about within a marriage is that you have to give 100%. It's not a 50-50. It's 100%, and that's always in our kids give us a hard time about if we get in an argument, I'm always going to take her side. And I said, well, yeah, shouldn't I? Yeah, our oldest was always a bug by that. But we try to give that as an example of doing that. So and it's very easy to do, because as I don't know if this is everybody, but I definitely married up. As much, so it was a big step up. My roommate, at the time, when she said the interview, said, "What about this Valerie girl? Because she sounds, I was like, no, she's way out of my league." So it was definitely, something that, and I still believe that today, is that she's always leading me in a lot of different directions and in a lot of things, both spiritually as well as personalities and everything like that. So, good?
Yeah. Shall we call her back? Yes. Okay.
I have a question for you guys then. So, what's love?
What's love?
What is it? Like, for marriage,
For marriage?
she can think first if she wants, it's okay.
Well, I mean, it's definitely that attraction for sure is involved. But it is also a daily choice that you make when you wake up in the morning. And it involves a lot of things that have becoming just recently important to me, which are different virtues. It involves patience, it involves humility, it involves listening deeply, not just hearing what they're saying, but really listening. And I think it involves the best interest thing and being able to take a risk for that. And I'm not trying to blow my own horn here, but for example, security is something that is very, very important to me personally. It's something I really pray a lot about. And at one point with Andy's job, he was miserable, and he had this thing. It was during COVID, and they said, well, you can either, what was it? It was to take 3 months of development, and then we'll reevaluate to see if we want to keep you, or you can resign and we'll give you 3 months of severance. And security is really important to me, but I knew in my heart that this was not a good situation. I knew that they were just going to coast for 3 months. They hadn't been paying attention to the work he'd been doing anyway. His project, his manager didn't even know what he and his partner did. It was just, and I said, no, you resign right now. There's something else, you'll find something else. And I felt very strongly about that, even though I was afraid, because, you've got 4 kids and you want to make sure everything's taken care of. But it was like, no, this is not good for you. This is not what God has planned for you. Let's jump ship. So it's being able to voice what's important to you, but having maybe what's important to them be the main priority. So, what do you think love is?
And I want to add to that, and that was a pivotal, kind of situation for me. But the other virtue, or I don't know if it's virtue or not, but sacrifice. Because sometimes you have to, for the best interest, like Valerie said, this example she had, is not always what you want to do, or it's not always what you have in mind. And it's easy to say, oh, we sacrifice for our kids, but sacrificing for your spouse is another part of it, where if it's easy, if it's something you love, something you do, it's natural. And I heard a speaker once talking about theology of the body, and he talked about being free from the law. And he talked about, how many of you are going out to kill? And because the commandment says, thou shalt not kill. Well, you don't think about every day, oh, I shouldn't, well, maybe not. It's good term, sorry. But you don't think about that to say, oh, I can't kill today. Because you're free from the law, you're just making that choice naturally that you're not going to kill somebody today. And so for us and for our relationship, it's been very natural that for me, her best interest or our best interest and talking things over and being together, it doesn't feel like a sacrifice doing things for or with Valerie and as a couple and things that might be sometimes hard for me. And I'm not perfect by any means. I still mess up, but having those things and doing those things for her is very natural.
So maybe we talked a little bit before, I'm afraid we're still on those answers, but well, getting back to what is love, yeah, it's all these things combined. I guess I want to talk about humor. We have to look at everything. There's so much that you have to talk about with your partner. So many things you got to wonder about, and if you can't blow off a little steam and say things that are funny, it can, there's just a lot of weight there. So it's every once in a while you just have to be able to lift things up with something that's funny. And So, it's good that we can just laugh about stuff together, even stuff that's not necessarily appropriate, but it's like, okay, yeah, we'll laugh about that, and we have to sometimes, and it's great, and I think it's part of it.
That's probably really true. It may not be the most appropriate in our dark humor sometimes, or our sarcasm. Hopefully mostly with just each other. You all said it, I think, really well, that love, and this isn't just for marriage, this is like just in general in life. I think love is willing the best of the other, right? Like wanting something that's wanting the good for the other person, which you can use that for anyone, right? When you're trying to love them. But I think in marriage and in the vocation of marriage, it takes a really deep turn in some ways because that commitment is there, hopefully, right? That is the plan for it to be there forever, right? Like for the rest of your life. So when you will the best of someone, it's not just for this one thing, it's for all the things you don't know that are coming too. And that, again, also for life, like you don't know where you're gonna be in a couple of years. You might be stressing about that. You don't know what's gonna come in, whether you're ever gonna get that job or that thing that you are hoping for. And that might be stressful. When you are married, it's for both of you. And it's also for things that you hope for together that may or may not come. Maybe you agree in your, dating life and in your pre-K or whatever, your marriage prep, that you are like, okay, well, the right number of children for us is like 2 to 4. And then there's infertility. Right? So have you talked about it? What happens now? How do we deal with that change? How do we will the best for each other when we might want different things for something we didn't expect to come? Okay? And that's where all of that communication comes in, and that like love in action, like the choices that come in. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's, I didn't have problems with this, maybe because I grew up moving around so much, I didn't have problems with this one, but when he was wanting to be an orchestral musician, that's not your typical like career path where you go take a job interview and you can set limitations on what you want, right? I want to live in this city, and I want to be near my family, and I want to earn this much money, and this is how it's going to work. It is a lot, see, it's not like that at all. Right, no, it is open up, find out where the jobs are. They don't make what you think, and the auditions are on your expense to go to, and you may or may not get them, and I'll see you in a couple days, right? Let's see what happens. And, half expecting him to call and be like, we're moving to Buffalo. Woo! Right? Like, it's okay. That's willing the good, right? Like, it's okay, I'm on this adventure with you. I will that for both of us. Whether I want to go live in Buffalo per se or not, I want to do it with you, right? That's the plan.
Yeah, she was very, very, self-sacrificing that way to say, no, you want to go do this career, let's try it, let's see what we can do. Wherever you get the job, we'll go move there, it'll be fine. And that's totally freeing for me, because if I had to say I better be making this much money by this point, if I have to make so much money by this point in the marriage or whatever, it was hard enough as it was. I was just trying to get up there and play the music and get the job. But to know that she would follow me, that she would be part of it and wanted to be, and was excited about it, that made everything so much easier for me. As it turned out, it didn't happen. So she didn't have to move, I guess. But there was all heartbreak along the way, and I don't know how many times I had to call her up and say, yeah, I did not win this audition either. That got to be, but she was still there for me. She was still, willing to talk about it, willing to take a look at what was coming up in the future still, and being willing to make every single time I did one of these auditions, another change. Okay, we'll head this way. Okay, we'll head this way, and for her to be there through all that pain and heartbreak, and eventually leading that out as a career path, for her to say, yeah, okay, well, here's the next thing, what are we going to do? And I was teaching for a while, and that was great, and that ended, and I have a different job now, and she's been there been very, very integral to my ability to function, you know.
So I think from our perspective, if you're questioning, well, how do I know if we're a good fit, and you have someone in mind, ask questions of yourself and about the other person, like, how do we handle change? How do we handle uncertainty? Can I actually communicate? Do I feel comfortable saying the things that are hard, right? Like, even when saying the thing that's hard is, I don't really want this. And they're just kind of leaving it there. Like, what's next? How do they respond, and how do you respond to those complicated things? Because it is, like, you get married, it's gonna be the whole thing, right? Like, it's gonna be all the stuff that's good, and it's gonna be all the stuff that you didn't know was coming. You know, a health issue, a financial issue, a job issue, grief, a child issue, a disagreeing on how to handle a child issue. I mean, it's all of it. So don't get me wrong, there's plenty of good. I don't want to like just list negative things, but how you handle the hard stuff makes a difference. And so if that's working, that's a good sign.
I think, like what Beth and Scott talked about with how Scott was traveling, I've had a job for a long time where I was traveling as a consultant, and sometimes I would be gone 6 months, where I was leaving Sunday night and coming back on Friday nights or Thursday nights, something like that. So I was gone every week. And thankfully Valerie was military, so her father was gone for sometimes, that kind of stuff. But we're very intentional about, I wasn't getting in the way when I came home on the weekends. Because it's very easy to get into a routine, especially with young kids that we had at the time. We were very, she was very intentional about still including me in to what was going on in the family and what, you know, and the activities for the weekend, that kind of stuff. So it was very intentional, and we had those conversations, and I was very appreciative of that because it was, you know, hard for her, and, you know, it was, you know, me traveling and doing different things, and sometimes I would go, later on I was going for a month at a time to different places. And so she was very good about making sure that I was still part of the family and still involved in what we were doing, even if I wasn't there.
And that honestly involves a lot of trust, which is another thing that is crucial in it. I think it's hard, especially if you do come from maybe a background where there wasn't a lot of trust within the family. But it's gotta be someone that you trust. Like, Andy would always come home at the beginning of his traveling, and he would feel guilty for being gone so long, so he's like, I'm gonna take charge, and I'm gonna take the kids, and it was like, whoa, no, that's totally disrupting the routine. But I knew that he was coming at it from an angle of love, and I wanna help, I've been gone, and I wanna do my part. And then that just involves communication of, look, I really appreciate it, but we've got a routine here, why don't you try to join and be a part of the routine? And that way, so I would just say trust and communication are vital. You've got to be able to talk to the person, and they've got to be able to hear something that maybe they don't want to hear. And you've got to give each other time to process certain things, and then discuss them, and trust that this is who God led you to, and so you've got to work together to make the hard stuff work.
Should we do some questions? Yeah. Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to share?
One more thing.
Go for it. Okay, what's that?
Balance. Make sure that you are doing things that you love to do, that you hold on to your own identity, and at the same time that you're doing things together. I remember about our 10-year anniversary, we drifted apart a lot. We were heavily, heavily involved in our church, and different things. I was involved in something, he was involved in totally something else, and we were not together that much. And I remember we weren't getting along very well, and I remember somebody at church, I can still see where she was at the church when she said this. She said, you know, I see you and Andy up there all the time, but I never see you together. And it was like a slap in the face of when I went home and I said, you know what, we gotta fix this. This is not good. So just that balance of doing stuff together and keeping your own identity, because you are who you are, and you need to be proud of that, you need to love that, but just finding a balance is very important.
That's a really good one. I wish we had different couples up here from different lengths of time, because 27 and 32 years are kind of similar. Because yes, around 10, 15 years, I would say we definitely hit some of that. Depends on when you have children, depends on how old they are, depends on just a lot of things. But yeah, for sure, figuring out how to be me and how to be us, and how to have him be him, right? Because we're all gonna wanna do that. You don't think, it sounds so basic, well duh, just go do your stuff, right? But life is super busy, and you're trying to make everything work, and the kids have places to be, and you've been told what's the right thing to do, right? This is what it looks like to be a good marriage, or a good Catholic, or a good Christian, and this is how you're supposed to serve, and all the things you're supposed to do, and all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, holy moly, I don't know what I do anymore. That's just who I am, and how that gift of who I am as a child of God contributes. I'm just sort of a cog in the marriage family machine that we've created. That's rude in a way of saying it, but I think it's a rude awakening that happens. And so if we had couples up here that were in different stages, I think that would probably echo, we all kind of went through it at the same time. Every marriage, from my experience and seeing all of our friends, I think we would all agree, has really rough times. Really hard times. They may be short if you're lucky, but they're really hard. So that's not the end of it. It's kind of just divorce is off the table, so we got to figure it out together. What are we going to do? And nobody was actually going to say, I want to divorce you. We already knew it was off the table. So then the question became, what do we do here? And each of us is asking it individually, right? Because at that moment, you're probably not communicating a whole lot. So it happens. Okay, did you want to add to that? I didn't want to take it.
That's good.
Okay.
Anything else?
We got a list of questions that came to us ahead of time, and then we'll be happy to take more questions about whatever, I don't know, whatever you want to ask, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the first question was, and we may have already addressed this one a little bit. What virtue of spirit and mind do you find is absolutely key to the success of a relationship? What virtue of spirit and mind is key? I would say patience. We covered that a little bit.
Humility.
Yeah.
Being humble before your spouse.
Anything else?
I forgot.
No,
You stole mine.
I did? Oh, she did. You're such a good couple. Well, do you remember it?
No.
Oh, do you want me to come back to you?
Come back to me.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not exact.
You remember.
I'm not sure if this qualifies as a virtue, but being able to really think about where is this going? What are, the big picture.
Prudence.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll let her define that for me. We pray, we try to think about how this marriage can bring us closer to God. We talk about how we can help each other get closer to God. We talk about how we get our kids closer to God. And there's still that whole variability, the whole change thing. I don't know how, it's really important. So it's important for your own personal life, whether you're married or not. And then it's also important if you are trying to marry someone. You can plan all you want, you can do all the things for your plan. You want to find someone that your plans with work, yeah, that's great. And then you go on to live it, and it's going to change. As soon as you start living it, it's going to be different. So you have to be with that person, ready to talk to God, ask God, listen to God, try and figure out what in the world God is saying, and be there with them, and take the steps forward. You look at the big picture. Here's where we want to be at the end of our lives, and we keep walking that way.
And I think on that, just things will change, and some things may not, but you need to ask yourself, I don't know what our life's going to be like, but no matter what, is this the person I want to be with, no matter what God hands us?
And that one's hard because you're going to change, and your partner's going to change. Like, it's not just about life-changing circumstances. It's like I look back and I am not the same real person that I was when I was 21. No one should be, right? Like, some things should develop, they should grow, but I definitely remember us standing in the kitchen and me being like, I don't know if I even still believe that. I don't know if I still even think that anymore, right? Like, having moments where you realize life happens, but also you develop and grow, and you don't necessarily know what you're going to be like. So if that's true for me, it's going to be true for him, and I have to be committing to the idea that whatever he becomes, that's something that I'm ready to be with. I don't really know how you say yes to that. It's a big leap of faith. Huge.
And I think it was talked about earlier, patience and sacrifice and some of those things. We said it was easy, but relationships are not easy. Relationships have friction with each other, and knowing that you have that, like Scott said, that we want to end up together. Valerie surprised me with the engraving inside my ring is my escort to heaven. And so that's where our goal is, to help each other get to heaven. And so we know that, and since that trust is there, that friction, while it's still there, it's easier to know that you have the hope of it will go away, or we will get through this. So keep that in mind, is that yes, the friction is there because just we're human and we have human relationships, and there is that, and that it is messy a lot of times, but knowing that somebody's there walking with you, even if it's sometimes hard, is part of being married and part of having a partner.
All right, you guys ready to talk about dating? I know, I'm just making sure you're ready. Okay.
All of us.
Okay.
So the next couple of questions were about dating, and I'm just going to preface this. Y'all, we haven't dated for...
What do you mean? We date all the time. We go to.
That's very
It's hard
We
for
get
the first time,
Target.
and then our kids were like, what?
Yeah, so that's the kind of dating we do
Kroger,
now.
come on.
Target. How's it going?
No, but I really did feel like I was like, oh, I don't think I'm qualified to give dating advice. I wish I could. We'll do our best, but you do realize there wasn't even an internet when we were dating, let alone an app that you were swiping or any of that.
Smartphones at all.
It's none of that. So anyway,
Yeah, we need younger couples here.
You're
I'm young at heart, but yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna make you all answer the first one.
Okay.
What's the first one? How can you be chaste while you're dating?
Oh, you got a good answer for that.
Okay.
And the microphone to me, thanks.
And what do you say?
Hand the microphone to him.
Oh.
Okay, go ahead.
The thing is that it has to be a choice together. If it's really important to one person and not so much to the other, you're playing with fire there. So, and mistakes happen sometimes. And so you can always make the choice at any point in your relationship to be chaste. And then you have to do it together. And if you do it together, it is not as hard as I think as people make it out to be. So that's my opinion. It has to be an equal choice. And if it's not, then you might need to dig a little deeper as to whether or not this is what you want, ultimately.
That's a good answer. Do you have anything else to say?
Um,
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, it's okay.
I don't know. I mean, I was. Yeah, I have no idea what to. I have have no idea what you guys are dealing with at your
Yeah,
age.
true, that's true too.
You know, you guys are probably wondering, can I have my cell phone on date? I mean, I don't know, maybe that's not even the thing, maybe everybody always has their cell phone up. You know, we didn't, I know, you know, we didn't have,
Oh, no, it's being chased.
I'm done.
We're all friends here, it's good.
You have to remember, for us for sure, and probably all, we've been married longer than we were not married.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the other thing, is that we've been together longer than we lived our lives not together. So it's been a long time, not quite a bit, you know, so we got married pretty young as well. So, you know, it's been a while since we dated, but yeah, the trust, but it goes back to what Valerie said, the trust and the talking out and having agreement, but that goes back to the communication and the openness, and it may not be, it's telling them what's best for them as well as what's best for you. It's those communication and having that open talk.
Yeah, I like your answer though about like, too, that it has to be both of you, because I can't even imagine trying to be chased in a situation where someone's pressuring me, or where I'm not convinced that I know what I want. It was just recently that I learned that chastity is part of marriage too. I know that may sound strange, but it was so obvious to me that it was part of it, that when someone said it, I was like, oh. Meaning, you're still willing the best of each other even in your sexuality, even in how you live that out in marriage too, right? Like this isn't just for when you're not married, it's when you're living that out on a regular basis in your home, and how you behave about it, and what you ask for, and what you don't ask for, and when you ask, and when you don't ask, and all of that. So back to, again, like you both have to be on the same page and able to communicate about it. If I were going to take a little bit of a risk here, I would say I wish we talked more about this when, not we, but as a general community of Christian people, I wish we talked more about this before, in detail, when we were not married people, your age. And that I wish that it had some teeth to it. Something beyond just, don't have sex before you get married. Like that seems like, if that's all we talk about when we're dating, or if that's like the most we can say, then I think we miss out on a lot of the beauty of understanding who we are as a full human being that involves a mind and a spirit and an emotion and sexuality and all these things, and we miss the chance to talk about real practical ways to address that. And so that's not something that we're going to solve here by talking to you. It's just something I would say it would be easier for us to communicate about it. It would be easier for everyone to communicate about it if we just had those conversations more regularly. Maybe times have changed enough that you all are. I would love that for you. So I'm hoping that exists in your experience of church and conversations. And if it doesn't, just know that the couples who have gone before you might suggest that it does.
So I don't know if you guys.
I think, and also to that point, when you get married, I think Beth brought this up earlier too, whether it's in a relationship and you get married and all of a sudden you're together all the time, you know, living together, that kind of stuff, or when you have a kid or something like that, we're just winging it. We're just doing the best we can, and you know, there's so much, you know, because their kids are different than ours, and their relationship is different than ours. We can read certain books and we can talk to certain people and that kind of stuff, but you know, you have to work it out between you because you're improvising everything. And you know, the joke is, you know, the first baby, and you're like, the pacifier falls on the floor, and we're sanitizing it and that kind of stuff. By the fourth one, we're like, dust it off and, you know, hand it off back in the mouth. But that's where we're improvising, and with all of these topics, it's that going back to the communication, but it's just okay, how are we going to work this out? What are we going to do now?
And then I'm going to just hop to kids for just a second, because I thought of
Yeah.
Abby. It's also okay to say, I'm not ready to talk about this yet. I don't know how to answer that question yet. When Abby was in 3rd grade, we were at the doctor, and she was reading all the information on her vaccines, and it said things to avoid. And she said, "Mommy, what's men having sex with men?" And I literally looked up into the heavens and went, "Really? Right now?" And I was like, "Abby, I am not prepared to answer that question for you right now. Can you give me some time?" And she was very practical. She said, "Okay." And then, I thought it was like 3 months later, on the couch, we ended up having a really good discussion about, not quite to that degree, but about sexuality and things like that. And I remember thanking God that He gave me that grace to say, "I can't answer that right now. Can you be patient with me?" And I think I did. I asked her, "Can you please be patient with me?" So communication with your kids is really good too, but it is okay to say, "Oh, I'm not ready to answer that yet."
Of all the stories we can tell about children. You guys want the last one?
Sure.
Okay.
So you guys started this. You might be the right ones to give a really good start to it. I don't know. Opinions or advice about Catholics dating a Christian that's a different denomination. Having said that, I just realized that relationship I was in that I thought was going to be marriage was not with a Catholic. So maybe I also know a little bit about that.
Go ahead.
Like I said, my dad was a great example of that, with him wanting to take classes so he could at least understand. And I actually had a lot of respect for him that he took them. He respected that. He didn't care to become Catholic himself, but he was 100% in support of anything that was important to my mom and to our Catholic faith. So I think that's it, is that just having that mutual respect for each other's faith, and then having some agreement on some things before you get to, "Oh, well, I want them to be baptized at the Catholic Church." Well, I don't want that. You just have to have those discussions beforehand, but I think with communication, it could work.
And I think being open about that, I didn't find out that my father really was pretty deep in his faith until it was probably 10 years ago. But I just saw him going to church every once in a while. He was Methodist and he was at a different church. Came to some of the big events for us, but didn't really, okay, it was over there. And then he would always come to Mass with us on Christmas or Easter, some of those kind of things. But I decided to go to church with him at his church on Christmas. But he told us at one point that, it was hard for him to make that decision to let us grow up Catholic, because I think he was the only non-Catholic in Louisiana. I'm not sure how she found him, but okay. But it was a hard decision for him and his family that he was marrying a Catholic, and so I didn't find that out until much later. And so I think that's the other thing, is being very open about that, because I really would have appreciated that knowledge, I think, growing up as well.
I had a lot of friends that were non-Catholic. Like, I actually really appreciated being around my Christian non-Catholic friends. And had I had the opportunity, I probably would have had a lot of friends who were even not Christian. I only had limited experience with that where I was. But I loved their perspectives, and we challenged each other in different ways, and still do. Like, I still appreciate that and have friends from that perspective. So I guess maybe it wasn't so surprising that I might fall in love with someone who wasn't a Catholic. And I think it can work. Like, my experience of why that relationship didn't work wasn't because of the Catholic and non-Catholic pieces. But everything you all said is true. You have to, have a lot of communication about it, some agreement, and things have to be kind of forthright. And maybe side, a little farther along, I can imagine it might have moments of loneliness. I'm not sure how couples, like if I couldn't share with Scott what I feel about the sacraments or what I struggle with about some of the sacraments, maybe that would be a little lonely sometimes. Now, I'm sure there are other friends I could share that with who are Catholic, but obviously the whole idea is that we have a level of intimacy where I should be able to like really discuss like my true heart and feelings and concerns. And so maybe that would be hard. And I don't have experience from that, perspective of actually having been married to someone else. But having, I think it can work. I think you'll find out if, you're working through things as you're dating, right? Like, how hard is it, and can you make it work? Ask the hard questions, talk about your families, talk about what it would mean to raise children, see how that goes.
Anything else?
I don't really have anything to add at this point. You guys made some great things, and yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any other
Questions?
I don't have any other pre-done questions. Would you guys like to ask any questions? We can pass you a mic, or you can just speak up.
So I guess I have a question. There's this one, scholar who makes this argument that marriage should only be 7 years, and the argument is at that point people get complacent and it forces people to keep trying. So from y'all's perspective, marriage being something that's a lifelong commitment, how do you avoid becoming complacent, being like, this person's going to stay with me regardless of who I am or what I do, and how do you keep always showing up and being your, the best self you can?
It's a good question. All right, you want to go?
Sure. I think I guess you have to kind of decide to show up for your own life. But if you're showing up for your own life, you have desires to want to be the best you can be. You want to listen and do what God wants you to do and impact the world in certain ways. And I don't know, it feels like having her around for all that. I never felt that. I never felt a need to be different, I guess. Then again, if you count 7 years, that's about when our first daughter was born, and I guess 7 years later would have been the third and final child, and I don't know, 7 years later would have been, I don't know.
21 years. Do you remember that?
I guess we're all the same for that. No.
Yeah.
I guess I think just, I keep wanting what's best for her. I maybe just haven't experienced life the way that philosopher did.
That's fair. So, if I'm understanding correctly, the idea is that I don't want to be unfair to the philosopher, but the idea is that you start taking them for granted, or you start taking the relationship as like a given, and therefore you stop trying.
Yeah,
Is that
the argument is after 7 years is usually when people fall into
like habits? and
Yeah,
things
and the
that-
argument is if you know the contract is going to be up every 7 years and you have to redo it, then you're going to try harder, and that's
Okay.
going to be better throughout your life. Is the argument the way that?
Okay, couple of quick things. Totally right, in a way. Yes, after you get to a certain point, you do start saying, okay, this is the way things are. And then life's gonna do something different. And so when life does something different, you're now in a new space together. So there's part one. Two, I think I have a fundamental challenge for that, which is I don't see it as a contract in any way, right? Like it's, by Catholic standards, it's a covenant, right? So there's that, which if you haven't had a lot of time, I will not be the right person to delineate the differences, but if you haven't had a time to like ask the questions about covenant versus contract, then it's a great conversation to have, because it's a really different worldview about what a marriage is. It's not, a Catholic marriage is not just, we agree to be together until we are done being together. Like it's not, contractual A, B, as long as you do A, I do B. It's not that, it's way deeper. And so, because I'm coming at it from that perspective, it's like, oh, I don't know if I can understand why you would walk away. Because you're both gonna change, life's gonna change, and kind of like he was saying, if you're not showing up for your own life to constantly be as good as you can, as best as you can, to hopefully keep developing, then you're probably not gonna do it for the other person either. So like, I would want to question my gut level, like, am I always just gonna wanna be my best self anyway? And then that sort of blows the whole thing out of the water. If I always wanna be my best self, then I can do that with this person.
No, I think that was good. And with that covenant, you don't ever get to that point. You're not looking for a re-election. You're not looking for a re-up your contract. Looking for, go to Boston or something. You're not looking for those kind of things.
Repeat Boston.
Boston, you went to the Red Sox and, I can't
Right.
But you don't ever think of that because it's not something that is a contractual, it's something that's an ongoing and that kind of stuff. So, to Beth's point, I haven't ever thought of it that way. It's not a re-upping at any point.
I would never want to restart either.
Oh gosh.
Like, can I just be honest for a second? Like, that's, if you can't, what happens after year 7 and year 8 and the levels of depth and intimacy and other things that you get to, those are great. And I would not want to restart and have to go, I said this the other day. I was like, I don't remember what brought it up, but I thought about it. I was like, oh my gosh, if you were gone, would not date. Holy moly. I would not start
That same thing.
I'm done. I wouldn't do it again. Not because you're not worth it, but because that isn't worth it.
Right.
It's hard. It's hard.
And I'll be honest too, if your partner is encouraging you to grow and to be better at what you are, I wake up every day and I thank God for Andy. And it's just so natural. And I think with the gratitude that I have, I'm good. Yeah. I mean, I hope that philosopher's happy in life because I can't imagine it is.
What are they looking for? That's another question. He or she, I don't know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Anyway. Other questions?
What other questions?
So coming from Catholic seminaries, did y'all have a spiritual director guiding y'all through the dating, engagement, and I guess marriage prep ultimately? Did y'all have someone guiding you through that? I guess except marriage prep because you have to have kind of a director for that. So.
Okay, go ahead.
I was clueless. I didn't know what a spiritual director was when I was your age. I've had a spiritual director now for 4 years. That's the first time. So I was 53 when I got her. So I'll be honest, I think we were I was much more clueless than I think y'all are. So.
And for me, I wouldn't say I had a spiritual director, but I was a youth minister my senior year in college. And so I worked very closely with our pastor and with the diocese and that kind of stuff. So he was the one who married us, and so we were prepping with him. And so I had a good relationship with both, and it was the kind of home parish at College Station versus St. Mary's. And we had a good relationship with the priests at St. Mary's, and so they celebrated at St. Mary's for our wedding. So I wouldn't say spiritual direction, like a spiritual director like I have now too, but it's more of, we did have some, some guidance.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think we had anything. Dating, no, I don't remember. My friends, her friends, I don't know.
We're still making it all up.
Yeah, we were just, but yes, by the time we were getting serious, I don't even, the priest who was here at the Catholic Student Center, he was an amazing director for our lives. But I never sat down with him and talked to him about our lives. It's just, he was just the priest. So, but I don't know. If you have resources, that's great. We just had friends.
Just have friends.
I am remembering though that, the water you swim in is different, right? Your generation, the water you're swimming in is different probably than what we experienced. So I am remembering that, getting married when we did, at the age we did, wasn't quite as young then as it might be now. I was married when I just turned 23, and And so I remember, like, there was a lot of talk about marriage and whether you were finding the right person and all that, and there were books people would talk about, you know, are you looking for them in the right way? What do you pray together? You know, things like that were out there. And we definitely had some, I don't know that we followed that, but we had some non-Catholic ministers, youth ministers, campus ministry type people who would talk regularly about this. Not to us directly, right? Not to us as a couple, where it was more, you know, customized. But we'll talk about that. And I would say we actually probably bonded over, to a certain extent, how we didn't agree with what they were saying. So to a certain extent, that generated conversations that became part of our growth together spiritually as a couple. We did not have a spiritual director. I wish we had in some ways, but I guess we were okay. Unless you count, okay, wait, one more. Unless you count our parents, they didn't talk to us directly necessarily either, like sit you down and have a hard conversation. It wasn't like that. But we both are blessed enough to have families that have long relationships at our parent level too, right? So my parents are like the super cute old couple who love each other and like they're my goal one day, right? Like I love, they're insane, but they're awesome. And they've been married 58, 59 years, whatever, his parents as well. And so there are certain things that they could share that would probably be, and probably did, that were helpful.
And I would say, Valerie and I, all the other things, we were very involved in Aggie Awakening at St. Mary's, and so we were doing things together. And I remember a conversation we had, and I was, I think I was in Chicago, I'm not sure, we were traveling or I was around, and I'd come down for Awakening, and she was super into it, and I was like, yeah, but I'm dating you. And she's like, no, we have to have God. And finally she explained that it's not God between us. Well, because I imagined it as God holding our hands, standing between us, and she said it's more of us holding our hands and God wrapping around that. And so it was a very good conversation in the fact that she was leading me, as she always has been, in the spiritual side of bringing that and bringing Christ into our lives as a part of our relationship, not between our relationship.
So one more thing.
So I don't know if this is still the same, but we took, I want to say it's called Focus. Anyone? Okay. There's a test, I don't know if that's the right word for it, survey that you would sit down and individually answer your questions for as part of marriage prep. I don't remember how many there were. Was there 150?
And we did that.
Wow. I don't remember it that way.
Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about like what I must have been like deeply ingrained in my student life days where 150 didn't sound like so many questions as it sounds like now. But it's okay. But so you would answer questions, right, about how much you would agree or disagree with certain statements, and then, you know, potential spouse does too, and then you compare. So you're engaged at this point. So these conversations should generate some pretty good things to talk about. And it's not intended to like make it hard for you, it's intended for you to bring stuff to the light, right, that you need to have. So I remember that. It was hardly spiritual director, but it was a point of help to have things come up, or to know that something didn't need to come up. The other thing we experienced, you said we had friends. That's actually very important in the sense that, you may have forgotten this, we had one friend who were engaged and then broke the engagement. And that was actually key, because I think some of what happened in the world at the time, and maybe it's still this way, is that engagement was really just the time to prepare for the wedding itself. You had made your decision, it was over. You were really just doing practical things to get to being married. And that's not how we approach things. Engagement is, in Catholic time, a specific time, right? It's a specific being with each other that is different than not being engaged and different than being married. And so an engagement that doesn't end in marriage is fine. You did what you needed to do to decide what had to happen in that time. It hurts, I'm sure, and there's a lot of pain involved, but it's very important that kind of informed us too. It was like, oh yeah, we understand engagement doesn't always lead to marriage. That's why you have it. That's why it's there.
Any other questions? We can keep going. We still have time, or you can be done. I don't know. Go ahead.
Yes. So I guess for the guys, in terms of being patient for eventually dating and getting married, did you guys at all in that time of being patient, being friends, going through those proceedings, imagine or start to envision what life would look like with your partners?
So Valerie said I was patient. Valerie knew everybody I dated. Because we were in choir together, and I dated a lot of the girls in choir. So, patient was, I think an exaggeration, but I'm not sure that's that. But you go whenever you're get serious about somebody and you start thinking about that. And that summer where she was in Indy and I was in Chicago, that's whenever I started thinking about this and not pressuring, not pushing, not doing anything like that. But that's whenever that approach was more patient and more slow of, okay, this is a relationship, this is more than that. And so I think that's where I started thinking about. And it's just like we've done in every part of our lives. I had no idea when I kind of got blindsided whenever my job said, you're either laid off or and I kind of got blindsided. And my first reaction was do anything I can because my focus, my plan was to take care of my family and have a job. That was my vision. And whenever she came back to me and said, that doesn't sound like a good choice, was amazing. But a lot of times the things that you imagine are not the items. But for me, yes, you start imagining that. As I started building a relationship with Valerie, that was more than just a friendship. I mean, we were friends for a while. I started seeing that it was that was somebody that I would like, even if it wasn't her, somebody that was all those things that she had, the kindness, everything like that, and all the qualities she had was what I wanted in a spouse.
Similarly, I'm sure that from the first time that we started hanging out, I was thinking about her. I'm sure I was thinking about her constantly, but it's funny because at that time, I don't think that I could see 2 weeks beyond my face. There's a sense of to me at that time, what was considered the future was not very far away, I guess, is where I'm trying to go with this. So, yeah, I did think about what my life would be like with her, and it was going to be great. And then, okay, one of the things that I first noticed when I was first conversing with her was that, we'd start a conversation, and I had something to say, she'd have something to say, and as soon as I thought I knew where this conversation was going, it didn't go there. We had this whole other layer of things to talk about that I had no idea was coming up. It was surprising and exciting, and it made every conversation fun, and it was unlike talking with most anyone else that I'd talked with. And I think my vision for the future turned out about like that. As soon as it started happening, it was so much more and different and more exciting than I thought it would be. But yeah, I definitely tried to think about what it would be like.
So what I realized he didn't tell you before was that he usually shares this part of our dating history, was that the first date we went on, like the official first date, right? Official one. It was great. We had a great time. Went had like a long lunch, ended up talking for forever, had ice cream or something afterwards, took me back to my dorm, and it was a daytime date, I think, right? Okay, so at places that no longer exist, because that's what happens when you live as long. But anyway, apparently, and I shouldn't even tell this for you, but apparently he called one of his good friends and said,
I wrote a letter to my
I wrote a letter to my friends. This is what, 1990? Okay, it was a long time back. And I don't think I emailed them. I think I typed it on the computer, but I wrote a letter and said, I was about this date, and I told my friends, I just have to convince her to marry me now. And that was,
That's awesome.
that was like, the first time after we had talked all that time. And, yes, she was still dating the other guy at the time. I never came up with the conversation. I don't know, maybe it was a good time for me. No, it just never came up, but
Dating multiple people.
sorry, I should respond to that one. But yeah, I envisioned the future, so.
yeah. So that's what I was going to say, was to follow up on it. Yes, he envisioned the future, whether he remembers that or not, and we'll leave it at that. But yes, podcast.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Any other questions?
We're just a few minutes to the hour, so we can stay, we can answer more if you want. We're open. But we know you have life. Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. And very welcome. Do we need to do anything else here to finish these off?
Thank you all for coming. There are a few Lenten books as we go through Lent. So if you guys want to pick them up as you leave, you're welcome to. Keep an eye out for our next speaker series, which should be in May, a little bit before the busy students retreat. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.